Charlie Kirk has passed away.
Saying that Charlie Kirk has passed away.
Shock in the US after a prominent right-wing activist, Charlie Kirk, was shot dead while addressing students on a campus in Utah.
Charlie Kirk was recently killed, and my condolences goes out to his family and his friends in such a tough and tragic time. Today I want to make this video to talk about his death from a doctor's perspective and why it was very difficult for him to survive such an attack, or anyone for that matter. Hi guys, I'm Dr. Journal Austin, and I dive into everything medical and health related on this channel. So Charlie was shot in the neck, and I want to explain as to why a shot in the neck is usually fatal. Also, why I believe it was almost impossible for him to survive such an attack. Okay, I won't get into too many details. I just want to make this short and easy to understand. So let's dive into the anatomy of the neck. Alright, so I'm just going to show you a 3D model of the components of the neck. Of course, this model that I'm showing you guys right now is just showing the major blood vessels. The neck also has multiple other components like important nerves and organs. So what you're seeing here are multiple blood vessels, but I just want to bring your attention to these two major blood vessels here. The jugular vein and the common carotid artery. Now the common carotid artery supplies blood to the face and the brain. And you guys know the brain is the most important organ in the body. And the jugular vein takes the blood back from the head to the heart. Before I get into the importance of these two blood vessels here in terms of when there's trauma, I just have to mention that whenever there's some sort of trauma or damage to the neck, there are a few things you have to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to the airway, make sure there's no sort of obstruction to the airway, make sure everything is good with the breathing, make sure there's good nerve conductivity and there's no sort of damage to the nerves, and you also have to make sure that the circulation is good. So as I mentioned earlier, these two blood vessels are very important. The one that takes oxygen to the brain is this one here, the common carotid artery, and if there is damage to these blood vessels here, the brain goes without oxygen. And the brain cannot survive approximately more than 5 minutes without seeing irreversible brain damage. So that's why it's very important that once any of these blood vessels here are damaged, you have to make sure you find a way to stop the bleeding at all costs. And of course, so in the neck, you also have the spinal cord. Of course, it's protected by the vertebral column, but if there's some sort of serious trauma, like a gunshot wound, it's very, very likely that a bullet can also pass through the vertebral column and actually damage the spinal cord. And of course, once the spinal cord is damaged, the person will be instantly paralyzed from the neck down. So that's also very important to pay attention to. Also, I want to bring you guys attention to another important component found in the neck, which are the nerves. One specifically that I want to talk about is the vagus nerve. But just know that the vagus nerve runs through the neck. There's one on the right side and one on the left side. And once these vagus nerves are damaged, you can see serious complications depending on the severity and the location of the damage. They can have limited loss of speech, or there's a high chance that they can lose their speech entirely. They can lose the ability to not be able to swallow properly, or lose the ability to swallow at all. It can also affect things, for example, like digestion. Like if the vagus nerve is damaged, you can have serious problems with digestion. So most likely, the trachea or the windpipe, as they call it, and the esophagus were safe because the bullet did not pass through the medial side of the neck. It was located somewhere on the left lateral side in zone 2 of the neck, so which is somewhere around here. So yeah, there's a high chance that one or both of these two blood vessels were hit and they were damaged. So as soon as Charlie Kirk was hit by the bullet, the first task would have been to stop or reduce the bleeding. The next task would be to check to see if there's any sort of airway obstruction, make sure that the chest is moving, and then get him to the hospital as fast as possible. With the amount of blood loss that Charlie Kirk would have had from the videos that I saw, his body would have been in a state of compensation. That would have been the first stage. The heart will start to beat faster to make sure that it can compensate for the blood loss, and the blood vessels will start to constrict to keep as much blood in as possible. And then eventually, if the blood loss continued, his heart would have eventually stopped, and that's something called cardiac arrest. And you see, with such an injury, the most important thing would be to stop the bleeding, like I said. But apart from that, the only other thing the people around him could have done was to give him CPR. The goal would be to maintain blood flow as much as possible to the brain and other parts of the body. And in that instance there, unless paramedics were around, they really couldn't wait for anyone to come and save him. They had to rush him to the hospital as fast as possible. So yeah guys, this is one of the videos that I saw from the Charlie Kirk incident. As you can see there, these are not paramedics. So they would not have been able to be professionally trained to handle such a situation like this. The only thing those guys could have done was to make sure the bleeding is stopped or reduced as much as possible and get him to the hospital as fast as possible. Here was where Charlie Kirk was shot. This was the university campus, Utah Valley University. And when I checked the distance to the nearest hospital, it's all the way located here. And Google is saying here it would have been a 26 minutes car ride, which was very, very long for an injury like this. So there was a high chance that Charlie Kirk actually lost his life on the way going to hospital. What I must say though, that if paramedics were available, then Charlie Kirk would have had a way higher chance of surviving, because they could have made sure that all of his vitals were stable enough so that when he was delivered to the hospital, the doctors could have taken over and saved his life. You see, if paramedics were there, they would have been able to make sure that there's enough blood circulation, because they would have been able to stop the bleeding properly, or at least slow it down to a considerable amount. They would have been able to do blood transfusions. They would have been able to provide oxygen as well too, because oxygen is very important. So all these things here would have made a huge difference if these paramedics were around. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share. The people around Charlie Kirk, tasked with saving his life there, were given an almost impossible task. Only trained professionals are capable of handling such a serious injury. Like I said, my condolences goes out to his family and friends. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of pain they are going through right now. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. If you did find this video educational and helpful, then please consider subscribing. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.